Hello, everybody. DMGeezerjim here, running another recording. Oh, good. Hi, cutie. He was mugging until I started talking. How you guys doing? Happy New Year, 2024. Getting back into the swing of things, working on some additions to our monster catalog, our monster shorts. Today, I'm taking a look at this ugly fellow in the background, the Mummy, an undead creature. I want to say basic rule player handbook. Let's take a quick, yeah, basic rules presented in the free use basic rules. As always, first and most, thank you for joining me. Appreciate you sharing your time. We're just going to spend about 10, maybe 15 minutes talking about a mummy. A couple things to know about using this sucker in combat. Three, as usual, I'm going to try to keep us focused on three tips. We'll start with the stat blocks, the good and the bad about it. Then we're going to kind of sink into the lore. And as typical, we'll kind of, the lore discussion will bridge us into how and when to use these for more effective encounters. Referencing 5th edition D&D Beyond for our stat blocks. Uh, the 5e is 5e. Hopefully some of the information in regards to lore and tactics will apply to some other systems if you're not a 5th edition follower. But, you know, it is what it is. I am a 5e DM, so this is what I'll be focusing on for these chats. So anyway, on to it. The stats. Armor class 11, hit point 58, challenge rating 3. First and foremost, always remember D&D challenge rating is set up around the lowest common denominators. What the system is saying is if 4 level 3 players of the bare minimum ability should be able to handle this mummy encounter as a normal encounter. They might take some damage. They will probably use some resources, but it's a winnable fight. It's not dangerous. It's not deadly. It's not easy. It's a normal encounter with 4 level 3 versus 1. A little bit wrong there, personally. I think this is one of those creatures that got stuck in a weird way because it is soft, it's squishy, it's slow, it's kind of easy to kill, but if it touches you, it's going to jack you up. The downside is it's going to have a hard time touching a level 3 group. So let's keep that in mind, you know, just kind of as we're walking through the stats on it. Speed of 20 is a big no-no on this, is a negative on it. If you're fighting with the if you're planning on using mummies within your campaign, or within the next adventure, whatever, remember to give yourself small enclosed areas that will limit the player movement. If you give large 60 foot by 60 foot room and have 4 mummies crawl out of the jars in each corner, your players are going to be able to outrun them by their default speed of 20 to 30 if you think that through. So make sure that you're building an environment to where your mummies will have an opportunity to attack the players, or at least limit kiting effects with line of sight breaks or something, because you're losing mobility with this thing. Plus side is, another negative in my opinion, is vulnerability to fire. You got to be vulnerable to something sometimes. I get it, and that's kind of thematic with it. There's a lot of easy ways to deal fire damage, so keep those two factors in mind. Armor class 11, your wizard's going to be able to hit this on a roll of 8 or better with throwing their dagger from 20 feet away. Not going to be hard to hit it. But let's get to the pluses about them. Oh no, one more negative, passive perception of 10. They're not very aware. They have dark vision, but they don't have a lot of sensory, not a high passive stealth abilities, heat sneaks and hides, things like that will likely defeat a mummy with relative ease. Okay. Plus sides about a mummy statistically. Damage resistance, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magical. So in most of our lower level campaigns, level 1, level 2, level 3, a lot of the party is going to have issue dealing physical damage to our mummy from the simple fact that, not everyone's going to be sporting a magic weapon at level 1. Certainly not at level 2, maybe by level 3, depending on how you run your campaign. They'll have a little bit more access to magic items, but that's one of their resistances. They are immune to necrotic, they're immune to poisoned, they're immune to charmed, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, and poisoned, okay? So a lot of our crowd control effects, as it were, are not going to affect them. Restrained is not on the list, entangling roots, entangling growth, etc. Those kind of things will work just fine. But Hungry Earth, I've been playing the wrong video game too much, sorry guys. But anyway, so let's get into their offense. Multi-attacks. They have Dreadful Glare and Rotting Fist. Dreadful Glare is their crowd control ability. You can use each of these abilities once per combat turn. Dreadful Glare, you need to be able to see the target with your mummy, and the target needs to likewise be able to see you. If you can see them, they need to make a DC 11 Wisdom saving throw against this magic or become frightened. until the end of your next turn. So depending on how you use this, you might be able to typically start with your dreadful glare, immobilize an incoming threat, or immobilize with frightened. You're not free, you just can't move closer to the mummy as a voluntary action. Okay, so you can keep the bruiser away from you with this, because if you move closer, they can't move closer to you voluntarily. You can maintain space for one turn. If you get lucky, you might be able to paralyze them if they roll low enough. But DC 11 Wisdom is not that high. Level 3 players should probably have, I think, a +3 if they have a neutral Wisdom and proficiency 1 to 3. So not the highest DC check in the world. Only useful for one turn, and once they make the save, they're immune to that ability forever. So tactical use of that might buy you around with a mummy against a level 3 party. Okay, now the second thing is what is imbalancing about a mummy. The Rotting Fist, okay? +5 to hit is not the worst for level 3, but it's still there. That's a decent chance. The damage is what's scary about a mummy, okay? 2d6 +3 basic bludgeoning damage plus 3d6 necrotic damage. When you punch somebody, you're doing up, potentially 5d6 +3 damage. On an average, that's going to be a minimum of 8, a maximum of 30 in one punch, okay? An average of 20-ish hit points of damage. Furthermore, as if that's not bad enough, 20-ish on an average is pretty bad damage for a level 3 party for something that's considered a normal encounter. But because it's so easy to kill, that's the idea on the balance. Now, if you're paying attention to space and you have a mummy in an enclosed in a closet, you're going to be in some trouble because of its damage output, okay? Here's where it gets a little bit scarier. DC 12 Constitution saving throw would be cursed with mummy rot. What that means is the cursed target cannot regain hit points, and its hit point maximum decreases by 3d6 for every 24 hours that elapse. So, worst case scenario for your best case scenario for my players or for the group, we get in the corner, we get this guy, we can kill him in one round and no one gets touched. Medium case scenario is I punch somebody for 20 points of damage. They have 40 points. Let me do the math on it. We are going to have a level 3 fighter, we'll say, with a constitution bonus of +4. So that's going to be 12 plus 30 is 42. We're just going to pretend he rolled max hit points. All things considered, 42 hit point fighter. Squaring away with this mummy, and this mummy cranks out his average of 20 damage. So our fighter is now reduced to 22 hit points, and if he fails a save, he doesn't get to heal again until this curse is removed. And that's the key point. It's not a long rest, it's not a short rest, it's a remove curse spell, which is a level 3 spell, which requires a level 5 caster. So that's kind of the difficulty that we'll talk about in the second part as far as the staging. So this has the potential to be a lethal encounter for the wrong level bracket based on the initial damage output and the fact they're going to take another 3d6 damage 24 hours later. If your dudes are 6 days away from the nearest temple and they didn't bring a cleric, someone's going to die. Or someone that has removed curse, someone's going to die. They're going to take 3d6 damage all the way back to where they can find some healing. Now, that's tempered by the second fact. The second thing we need to know about as a DM about mummies is their lore in relation to game. First and foremost, your mummies are typically victims of the curse that made them undead. Very few people willingly become mummies, and no one accidentally becomes mummy. It's not like you're a revenant and you got pissed off and your spirit ties you to the ground, or you're a ghost and some sadness causes your spirit to haunt this. This is a forced act upon you by an outside force. Typically slaves, sometimes a traitor to the crown or the traitor to the priest or whatever, were cursed with mummification. Process goes through, rituals are done, necrotic energy infuses, and whatever your lore is for undead animation in your world, whether it's a spark, whether it's a fragment of the other person's soul, or whether whatever your thing is, that's what happens with your mummy. And now your mummy is cursed into being trapped in this body until conditions are met. And typically the conditions are guarding this temple, guarding this MacGuffin, protecting the long lineage of this family's tomb, blah, 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 blah. Mummies are almost exclusively guardians. So, number one, they're not willing guardians. Number two, they're cursed guardians. They're not going to be wandering around. They're not going to be doing any of that, which is kind of going to segue us into +3. But our third tip, as you were. Because these are victims of mummification and victims of a curse, there's a trigger that goes to this curse. If something is disturbed, then the mummies arise. Okay, keeping in mind our combat rating, our challenge rating of 3, the fact that they're pretty squishy, they're a little bit low, but they have a pretty potent damage output. Where and how to use them can be kind of tricky and can be a little bit of an important factor. Let's step up the ladder a little bit. Let's ignore the CR. I think using 3 or 4 mummies for a level 6 group, plus as an entry encounter, as a yard trash, I guess is a good video game term to use, as the shock troops, as your, as grunts. Perfectly acceptable level 6 or 7 because your party should be able to deal with the remove curse. And they have more than enough hit points. And at that, the damage output in the 2 hit is so high that whether you're using a white or a mummy, odds are they're not going to live very long against a level 6 group. But you have the added bonus of if you get lucky with that mummy rot, it changes the paradigm ever so slightly. It taxes the resources of the group a little bit more. Okay, guys. If you don't have remove curse, if your group doesn't have instantaneous access to remove curse, and they don't have access to a temple within a 24-hour trip of where they're fighting, or you don't put something in there within a day of them fighting that mummy, that's kind of on you as a DM, and you're going to put a character out that way. You're going to get unlucky, or you've got to be so DM heavy-handed about not touching any. Ooh, I'm almost touching you, I'm almost touching you. That you don't actually threaten them, so what was the point of making it there anyway? So, paying attention to the abilities, the damage intake ability of your mitigation of your group, and their access to remove curse is going to be the key to using a mummy or a series of mummies in your encounter. More than the lore, more than the combat abilities. The third thing that you need to keep in mind with when you're using mummies is access to remove curse. If your players have that limited, then you need to limit their interaction because you're going to ruin somebody's day. I got to remind you, not only did they take the damage, if they fail this thing, they take the curse. And from there, they're not allowed to regain hit points. So whatever their hit points were when this mummy punched him and whatever happens after that, they don't get to heal that up. It's not like, okay, well, I took 20 points of mummy damage, but I have 50 hit points. So, the orc did 15 hit points, which took me down to 35, but on long rest, it takes me to 50 because of the mummy. No, you've got the rot. So when the orc hits you for 15, your maximum is now 35. And then tonight you're rolling 3 more D8, and that maximum dropped by 8. So now you're starting the day tomorrow with 27 while you rot away without remove curse. And we're talking about a beefy boy. You drop this sucker on your wizard or your sorcerer or your warlock, the equation is going to change significantly. The possibility of death for your player is going to increase. So third thing is tactical application and use. Knowing that these are not wandering critters. These dudes ain't out there for a Sunday stroll. They didn't all get up out their coffins and go, oh, look, I'm a mummy. Oh, time to go eat. They're not zombies. They're not ghouls. They're not skeletons. They are designed, cursed, and placed as guardians. So the location should be tombs. It should be, the whether you're into Egyptian theme, inking thing, it doesn't matter. The whole, it doesn't even have to be humans. You could go lizard folk. You could go freaking nagas. You could go whatever kind of creatures that are into protecting and preserving their bases, their temples, their crypts, their secrets, is where you use mummies, Change it up a little bit. Have 11 crazy-ass kobold mummies come straggling out of vases at your players. That's going to scare them a little bit, man. Yeah. Obviously, make sure don't adjust hit points. Let them have the hit points of the AC they have. They're mummies now. They're not kobolds. You know, this used to be a peasant. This used to be the guy that spilled the wine on the pharaoh's shoe and got taken downstairs and turned into a mummy to guard my winery forever. That's what a mummy is. So this is a commoner that got buffed up. You could do the same thing with kobolds and any of your other humanoid creatures if you want to, change up the feel of it. But they're guardians, okay? They're always going to be static in their positioning. They're going to be dedicated to their goal of guarding or recovering treasure. If they're out wandering the streets, it's because someone stole the gem of Bumra and all of his troops are out there scouring the city finding it. That's going to be where you might have active mummies running around out there. But outside of that, they're going to be location based and they're going to be trigger based. Your players or something should have happened to actually activate them. Cool? But yeah, man, thank you guys for joining me. That's the 3 things about the mummy. First thing is their stats. They're pretty squishy. They're pretty slow. A well-prepared and skillful group will likely never get touched by a mummy unless you put them in close quarters because of their slow movement. Their damage output is low in regards. They only have 1 attack and they don't have the highest plus, but it's high in regards to what they do is pretty significant, and they have the chance of really altering the timing or the resources of an adventure with mummy rot. Dreadful glare is there. Always remember to use that for a little bit of crowd control. Buy yourself some space, but it's not something to rely on. It's just an extra roll. If you get lucky, someone gets stuck this turn. If you don't, no harm, no foul. It didn't cost you an action. So don't forget about your dreadful glare. Oops, sorry, losing something there. But last but not least, make sure that you are planning and you are aware of your group's resources, namely access to remove curse before you start employing mummies or too many mummies. If they're on limited spell slots, it's a 3rd level spell. I think clerics, druids, and wizards. I think sorcerers might get it. I think it's a broadly available spell, but it's level 3, which requires your group to be level 5 at minimum before they get one of those slots. Level 6, they get 2. So if your group got 1 cleric with 2 remove curse spells at level 6 and 3 people get mummy rot, someone's SOL tomorrow. So pay attention to the accessibility of the remove curse because it's going to affect the resources that are impacted when you use this in combat. Cool? 3 things to know, man. But hey, DMGeezerjim here. I do want to close out with a thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing it with me. I hope you learned something from this in regards to using mummies in your 5th edition campaign. As always, likes, follows, subscribes are greatly appreciated. Want to hear back from you in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's some monsters you want to take a look at. Let me know if you have any more questions. If you maybe this quick little conversation might have spurred some thinking that you want to chat about. Would love to hear back from you in the comments. But above all else, thank you for sharing your time with me. Have fun out there D&Ding, and y'all be safe.